it's better to have, they find it's better to have him in rows with the teacher moving around, never know when he's going to be in your face next. So the boy's a little nervous. But to have a very relaxed, reassuring, nurturing classroom, it just doesn't seem to work for the average boy, especially a boy that hates school. He will tune out. Anyway, but these feminist organizations have thought that we have to rescue them and change them. And just to almost end with a story, my son, when he was in high school, his class went on a camping trip in the desert, and a creativity teacher came to lead them in an exercise. And he loved the camp, but he didn't like this. This creativity facilitator came, and she gave them each a notebook, a candle and matches, and a pencil. And they were supposed to walk just a little bit into the desert, not too far, but at dusk, and sit down by themselves and discover themselves and write about it. And my son and his friends were just like, what the hell? Like, what are we going to do? The girls, maybe they were a little confused too, but they did. Girls do take instruction better than boys. They did what they were told, and they wrote about the haunting loneliness of the desert or something. I don't know. The boys gathered together, threw the notebooks and the pencils into a pile, and lit the match and made a bonfire. And this teacher, she responded like Gloria Allred to the little boys catapulting the baby carriage from the roof. She thought they were proto-arsonists or sociopaths or something. They were just boys. And increasingly, being a boy in our society is being treated as if you are, a failed girl. That you need to be rescued. That it's a pathology in need of a cure. And so, what I'm arguing in my book, and what I'm urging you today, is to tell you that boys will be boys. They must be gentlemen. I'm not saying just let them run rampant, but they do need to be civilized. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean turning them into girls or only, setting girls as the gold standard and then judging them as derelict girls or deficient girls. So I think we have to find our way back to boys. And I think that we have to. A lot of this was caused by litigators. So as I speak to an audience of future lawyers or present lawyers or law instructors, I urge you to find a way to combat the ACLU fighting these single-sex schools, because this is where we're probably going to find, and to combat them. Going after aviation high school, that is ridiculous, and it's happening in a big way. This is not small. This is Perkins Fund. It's a $3.4 billion bill that funds vocational training in the United States, and they're getting all this gender politics into the middle of it. It's too boring to read about. No one follows it, but it's happening, and it's not boring to them, to the women's groups. They read about it, and they manipulate it to their curious ends. In conclusion, I will say boys are different from girls. There are exceptions, but on average, they have different wants, different needs, different ways of socializing, and this is true cross-culturally. I think it's something that we should face with honesty, and that we should find ways to be as fair to boys as we've been to girls. We should look at what worked for girls and try to do those kinds of interventions for boys as well. Thank you. Yes?
I haven't really thought about this as you have, but it seems to me, if this is a situation that's getting worse, it may be an irremediable problem, and maybe it's partly due to feminism. In other words, it seems to me boys have always been sort of obstreperous and wild and dangerous, and they've always needed to be socialized. But we've had institutions around which could socialize them in the past, like marriage, like the idea of being a gentleman, or the idea of being a knight, of someone who will go around, and protect the weak, protect women, protect girls, stop bullying. We've had this idea of the noble leadership of the male. The male's supposed to provide for his family. He's got to work because, by golly, he's going to be the breadwinner. Well, now all those reasons for socializing are disappearing, and partly is the fault of feminism. And I don't know whether just vocational fun of making airplanes and stuff is going to be enough to rescue boys.
It's true. The problem is, it's even more serious than I thought. If you look at Hannah Rosen's new book, The End of Men, and I debated her and didn't agree with her, but it will give anyone pause just to see the number of young men who are just, it's not just that they're not working, they're not even trying. They're just disaffected, and they're not being integrated into the population. And I remember a historian I heard one night was talking about, he wrote a book about hobos, hobo culture, and there were all these young men, especially before the Second World War, during the Depression, who just found their way living in railroad cars and having these little hobo communities, and they were poor, so they left the farms or wherever they'd come from, and they sort of liked it. And it was different from a bum or a tramp. He made some distinctions, but anyway, it just turned out there are a lot of men that don't mind it that much, just kind of leaving society and living that way. And his theory was that one of the reasons we had the GI Bill after the war and all sorts of support was to get men into the suburbs, get men into families, get them civilized. They were actually worried. They were almost like hobo armies, these disaffected, disengaged men. And then, so men did it, they got into the home, and then 2 minutes later, Betty Friedan is writing her books, I'm imprisoned in this house, and and the feminist movement started, berating men. But I can see that a lot of men might just say, okay, fine, I didn't want to be here anyway, and disappear from sort of organized, civilized society. And societies that, all societies have put a lot of effort traditionally into civilizing their young men, because young men that are not civilized have very unpleasant ways of making themselves noticed. And so you do have to have efforts. And we had military schools, and we had lots of boys' schools, and all sorts of ways. Most of the young men went into the military. All that's gone. And right now, we're just beginning to see the beginning of... Now, I don't think we're in a crisis. I think that it seems to me there's some reasonable things we could do, but we are so poorly prepared. And we have these women's groups that, for reasons that made sense a long time ago but do not make sense now, they will not quit. They are going to fight, they're going to sue. Yes?
Can you speak a little bit to I think, a problem that has arisen in society now? It's wonderful, I think, that, girls were helped, and now, doors are open in all kinds of careers and education and everything. But now there are all these young women who are highly educated, who can have good careers and everything, and they cannot find a guy to marry.
Oh, exactly.
There's not enough eligible men to go around.
No, this is a big problem, and there is something that the sociologists call assortative mating. Is people tend to marry someone that's about the same intelligence, the same good looks, and same education. Well, it's going to be very hard now to get someone as educated as you are. If you're a girl at, in law school, and or even at a liberal arts college, because there's just so many more girls. And so there's going to be a mismatch. And so a lot of young women are going to have to marry men that are less educated than they are. And the other thing is, I don't know, I don't want to overgeneralize, but there are some people writing just brilliantly on this, like Tom Mortensen, who's just been studying, he's a statistician at the foundation in Washington, D.C., an education foundation, but he was one of the first to see what was happening to men, that they were not keeping up, and that it wasn't a joke. In an information, knowledge-based economy, not to keep up your education, it's not what it used to be. Whereas it used to be, it was all right, you'd find your way back, you could get a job in a factory, or you could work. That's the past. This is the present, and it's a global economy, all of that. He saw this happening, and he thought we were going to pay a terrible price, because he thinks that men find their identity in their work, and they like to feel sort of like a hero for their family. And if they don't have that, if that's gone, it's it's just sociologically going to be, I think, quite destabilizing. Yes?
The groups that are going after these schools that are segregating the classes, boys to girls, what do they propose is the damage to females? It's not as if they're being denied education.
This is what's so annoying. If you look at the data on single-sex schools, it's a mix. You can find whatever you want. In fact, I would say this is true of a lot of education research, especially on classroom effects and class size. And I mean, if you tried to study, does it help kids to play musical instruments in high school or something? You know, you might not be able to prove that it does help them, even though you kind of know it does, but you can't prove it. So what the ACLU has done, in league with these 8 professors who wrote this article that got a lot of play in the New York Times, they looked at the research and they said, we can't prove that it helps. Can't prove it because there's a mix. Some programs look like they help, some it looks like the reason it's helping is because the parents chose to put you there, or we have a lot of single-sex schools because wealthy people, given that, you know, always, you know, they're Harrow and Eton and that sort of thing is a tradition for the wealthy, and so they think it's really a function of wealth and privilege rather than single-sex. So they discount the research. But so they didn't say that the schools did a bad job academically. They said it's a mix, we're not sure. They said it created stereotypes. Just by separating boys and girls, you're drawing attention to gender. And that's why I say they insist on the analogy with race. But you see, separating the races, that has a particular history of invidious treatment and discrimination. Separating the sexes in single-sex classes, that has a history of you know, something that the wealthiest people sought for their children because they flourished in those schools. It has a glorious history of success for kids that did it. So I don't see the analogy. They think this is a dogma that's very corrosive. They think that men and women are exactly the same except for some incidental physical differences. All the others were just created and we can reconfigure it, and so they see single-sex classes. On their website it's called ASSET, the Association for Single-Sex Education, Access, I guess, the American Council for Single-Sex Education. They have a test teachers can take to see how non-discriminatory they are. And one of the things where you lose a point, you take a test if you're a teacher, and you can go there and take it. And it says, do you ever say, good morning, boys and girls? Well, apparently that's a no-no because that's drawing attention to an irrelevant difference. It would be like saying, good morning, blacks and Latinos. And they say that. I know you cringe. But they got, you know, the ACLU says, we've got research. They've got these 8, and they are good I mean, they are neuroscientists. And Janet Halperin was president of the American Psychological Association. They are academics with good research in their area, but they don't know about single-sex education. They've just taken this attitude that it's discrimination, it's apartheid, and they can't. Now they're in league with the ACLU, and it's very hard to stop them. Yes.
Is there any evidence that subcultures like Orthodox Jews or Mormons or Muslim communities are immune to this kind of pressure?
Which kind of pressure?
Well, it seems in those subcultures, male identity is not going to be changed by outward pressure. I mean, if you go to Utah or Montana
right.
Or New York, the Orthodox Jews, it just seems like this is a non-issue for them.
Right. Well, those groups, and I know this very well because my husband's family are Orthodox Jews in New York that you described. They're pretty insulated. They live in their own world, and they also build up a kind of